The council meeting of November 17th, 2020 will now please come to order. Due to this meeting being a virtual meeting, council is asking if anyone would like to address council who is participating through the computer. Please use the chat feature now to let Clerk Massarolo know you have a comment, and you will be called on during the comment portion of the meeting. If you are calling on a phone or do not have access to the chat feature, we will give directions during the public comment portion of our meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Broussard.
Present.
Mr. Glassburn.
Here.
Ms. Heeman. Here. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Limpert.
Present.
Mr. Schuman.
Here.
Ms. Williamson.
Here. If there are no additions or corrections, the council meeting minutes of November 4th, 2020 are approved as written. The following legislation is considered for suspension of the rules this evening on second reading, Ordinance 2020-117. Mayor Kennedy, do you have a report this evening?
Madam President, I do. City offices will be closed for Thanksgiving on Thursday, November 26th and Friday, November 27th. ODOT has provided the city a draft contract for the transfer of all properties requested by the city. The contract is currently under review in the law department. The city will need to engage the services of a surveyor to establish a legal description and provide any other plat information to include in the contract. Several firms have been contacted to provide quotes for this services. Two firms have been interviewed last week to provide engineering services for the EQ tank project. The selection committee is working with the top firm to develop a scope. The Board of Control must approve the selection and agreement. The consultant's first task will be to begin environmental review of the potential sites. And Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Law Director Garreau, do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Madam President. No report this evening, but I hope each of you have as good a Thanksgiving as we possibly can at a difficult time, and we'll see you very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance Director Kopfer, do you have a report this evening?
Yes. On November 5th, 2020, September month-end summary and detail reports were sent to Council and the administration along with the quarterly narrative. And if you have any questions, I'm sure we'll probably be talking about what's occurred this year in relationship to the budget for next year. So if you have any questions ahead of time, otherwise I would be welcome those questions during our budget hearings. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving into council committee reports, the Committee of the Whole met on November 10th, 2020 at 9:14 p.m. Present were all members of council, the mayor, law director, finance director, and human resources director. First on the agenda was a safety service update. The mayor informed council he will be asking council to consider leaving the safety position unfilled for now and to have his selected service director candidate concentrate on the service portion only. Next on the agenda was the elected officials' salaries. The elected official salary ordinance is required to be done prior to the filing deadline for elected officials. Elected official terms are for 4 years and the salaries must be set for the full 4-year period. The salaries are not allowed to be adjusted either up or down during that 4-year term. This ordinance sets the 4-year pay for the mayor, finance director, law director, council president, and Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4 council members. There's a separate ordinance that will be set for at-large council members when the time comes for it to be set, which will be in a few years. The majority of council felt that all elected officials should remain on the same schedule and that legislation is prepared and will be on first reading on tonight's agenda. And that meeting ended at 10:05 p.m. and that concludes the Committee of the Whole report. Councilman Broussard, Chairman of the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do, Madam President. Thank you. The Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee met on November 10th, 2020, beginning at 7 p.m. Present were all of council, including committee members Broussard, Williamson, and Limpert, Council President Jones, the mayor, planning director, HR director, our city engineer, Pete DeFranco, and guests. We met to discuss two pieces of legislation, the first being Ordinance 2020-117, which reads, an ordinance amending section 555.09, emergency exception of chapter 555, noise control of the general offenses code of the codified ordinances of the city of North Olmsted to include emergency generators as an exception to the noise control standards and declaring an emergency. This one was handled by Mayor Kennedy, and essentially this just amends and updates our noise control ordinance to reflect the new standards of noise level being 66 decibels and distance to neighboring dwellings of 27 feet. The motion passed 3-0. Next, we discussed Ordinance 2020-121, which reads an ordinance dispensing with the formal RFP process and authorizing and directing the Director of Planning and Community Development to engage the services of Mott McDonald to undertake a road safety audit for portions of Berkshire Road and Porter Road for the purpose of investigating safety concerns presented to the council by the public and to make recommendations for roadway safety improvements and declaring an emergency. So this is, as indicated in the description of the legislation, this is regarding two particular residences, the first being on or around 28710 Berkshire Drive, where 3 cars have left the roadway in the past 18 years, including 2 collisions with the home itself. And then regarding 4500 Porter Road, 11 cars have left the roadway in 19 years, with a total of 84 accidents in this area reported since 2002. After much discussion regarding matters such as guardrails, rumble strips, motion and light activated signage, as well as generally practiced and recommendations as per the Ohio Manual of Traffic Control Devices, we decided to hold this in committee by a vote of 3-0. I also wanted to make mention that at the top of the meeting, in the couple of days leading up to this meeting, I had received via the council clerk several other areas of concern from other wards by my colleagues, and I indicated that that these were appreciated, but the focus of this particular meeting was going to be these two addresses listed in the ordinance, and that we would tackle the other concerns at a later meeting. So again, the committee voted 3-0 to hold this in committee. The meeting concluded at 7:56 p.m. and that will conclude my report.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williamson, Chairwoman of the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schuman, Chairman of the Finance Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do. Thank you, Madam President. Finance met 11:10 at 7:56 p.m. Present were all of council, including committee members Schuman, Broussard, and Kelly. Council President, the Mayor, Planning Director, HR Director, Law Director, Finance Director, City Engineer, and guests. First on the agenda was 2020-114. This is a resolution approving of and authorizing the mayor to enter into a collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME Local 2681, Clerical and Technical Unit, for a period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. This bargaining unit covers our building department inspectors, permit clerks, secretaries, receptionists, bookkeepers, and the recreation center maintenance employees. Cost of living increases will be 0 in 2021, 2.5 in 22, 2.5 in 23. The Clique Care HMO plan option will be replaced with the MedFlex HMO plan option in the year 2021, and the traditional PPO plan will be eliminated in the year 2022. These employees will get Martin Luther King Jr. Day, all-day Christmas Eve, and all-day New Year's Eve as additional holidays, and 50 cents has been added to the final step in all classifications. The entire sick bonus has been eliminated from the contract, and premium pay for having a commercial driver's license has been eliminated after January 1st, 2021. This is comparable to the other bargaining units we've been dealing with so far. This was voted 3-0 to recommend to full council. Next on the agenda was 2020-115. It's a resolution authorizing the Director of Human Resources to solicit proposals pursuant to requests for proposal process, RFP, for the lease and servicing of photocopiers, and further authorizing the mayor, subject to the approval of the Board of Control, to enter into a contract for the same. This resolution allows the city to solicit proposals for copiers and services, as the current contract will expire March of 2021. It took some time for the RFP to be put together, so it was requested that the resolution be amended to add an emergency clause in hopes that the RFP can be published in December of this year. This was voted 3-0 to amend and recommend to full council. Next on the agenda is 2020-116, which is an ordinance amending Section 13106 entitled Authority to Accept Donations of Chapter 131 of the Administrative Code for the Administrative Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted entitled Mayor, in order to revise standards for acceptance of donations to the City of North Olmsted. As per the council president, whose legislation this is, any donation over $1,000 must go to council first before acceptance of the donation. After some clarification by the law director, committee voted 3-0 to recommend. Meeting closed at 8:28, and I thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee, do you have a report this evening? Oh, I'm sorry, Clerk Mazzarello.
Are we going to, do we need to amend one of the pieces of legislation?
Councilman Schuman.
I believe it was amended in committee.
It would be 115.
I'm sorry?
We need to make sure that we also amend that on the floor right now.
Okay. I'll make a motion at this time that we amend. Sorry, this is, I'm sorry, which one was it? 116, 115?
115.
115. I'll make a motion that we amend 115 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to amend 2020-115 made by Councilman Schuman, seconded by Councilman Broussard. Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-115 is amended with a vote of 7-0.
That does conclude my report. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do have a report this evening, Madam President. Thank you. The Streets and Transportation Committee met on November 10th at 8:29 p.m. Present were committee members Limpert, Glassburn, and Kelly. The rest of council, Law Director, HR Director, Planning Director, City Engineer, and Mayor. First on the agenda was Resolution 2020-120, which was a resolution authorizing the Director of Planning Community Development to make applications on behalf of the City of North Olmsted for a Community Development Block Grant funds for fiscal year 2021 for the Elm Road Rehabilitation Project. Further authorizing the mayor to accept grant funds if awarded and to execute contracts with Cuyahoga County if required and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Lieber described this as a flow-through block grant from the county through competitive municipal grant program for up to $150,000 in funding, which do not require a match. The administration recommended the resurfacing of Elm Road, which is a street rated as one of the lowest in the city and is located in a low to moderate block grant and improvement fund area. So it's a nice fit for the block grant. Motion to recommend to council was approved by a vote of 3-0. Next on the agenda was Resolution 2020-111, which is a Clegg Road ODOT safety funding application. In detail, it's a resolution authorizing directing the Director of Planning and Community Development to make applications to the Ohio Department of Transportation on behalf of the City of North Olmsted for funding for safety-related improvements to Clegg Road, and further authorizing funds for the required local match, and further authorizing the mayor to accept the grant if awarded and execute a contract declaring an emergency. This is a follow-on from a meeting that occurred on October 27th. There were some follow-up questions since the meeting. Mrs. Lieber noted that the cost estimate would be approximately $765,000 and related to the safety study performed by McDonald. That additional third lane, a rough estimate was provided with $6 million of improvements, but no formal cost estimate was conducted as part of the safety assessment. They discussed why the third lane was not awarded for funding as part of the funding match. NOACA provided a planning level estimate of the total project cost, as mentioned, of $765,000 for Clegg Road to include resurfacing, as is no safety improvement, engineering, inflation-based repairs. Mrs. Lieber noted that that cost would be shared 50% with the county and 10% of the 10% of the 90-10 match related to the $480,000 safety funding application would also be split with the county as well. In regard to changing the scope of the project to add a full lane, which had previously been provided the rough estimate, Mrs. Lieber related that the County Public Works said the county typically follows suit with ODOT when it comes to the recommendation coming out of safety studies, and there would be this would be something above and beyond what the expected scope would be. Mr. Glassburn noted he understood that a new turning lane would need to be reevaluated as a new project, but wanted a different option proposed as Clegg Road is a major artery. Mrs. Lieber noted that once the preferred alternative was identified, the consultant assessment was focused on completing the details of the recommended solution versus those that were least preferred by the assessment. Mrs. Lieber noted that the public input was received by safety data by the public as well as safety data considered in that assessment. Mr. Glassburn expressed disappointment with the process, and Mr. Glassburn also noted he did not like the recommendation of the consultant. Mr. Kelly reiterated that Clegg Road needs a third lane. Mr. Limpert noted that the committee understands what the resolution entails and the costs. Unless there were additional amendments to the resolution, we should vote to move this resolution forward, given the uncertainties of COVID and future budgeting. And we should move this to a vote one way or the other so the administration can do follow-on steps. The motion to hold in committee was approved by a vote to 2-1, and the meeting concluded at 7:39. Madam President.
Councilman Lippert.
Given that there's been no additional amendments and the committee has completed a thorough evaluation of the resolution as it stands, I request that the resolution 2020-111 be relieved from committee and go to council as a whole for further consideration. I ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to relieve the legislation from Committee made by Councilman Limpert, seconded by Councilman Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
No, and also I did not second that.
I'm sorry, Councilman.
Mr. Broussard,
Yes, and I was the individual who seconded the motion.
Thank you.
Ms. Heeman,
No, I think with a comment, please. I think that while it's frustrating to have to discuss things at length, I think it's very necessary, and that if legislation isn't really ready to move forward, particularly projects of this size, that they should not until council comes to a better understanding of what the project should be. Thank you.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes, and I'd also like to make a comment. I appreciate that. I think a lot of us would like to see another lane go in, but I think we're in a position where if we don't do something, we'll end up with nothing. That's my biggest fear here. So it's a bird in the hand situation, and I think we should go for it. Thank you.
Mr. Glassburn,
No with comment. As has been stated in the committee, there were 3 conceptual options put out. Only one was fully explored. We did solicit feedback from the public after that one had been chosen upon by the city's administration. The public did not have the same opinion on this, and it appears that a large number of council members also do not share the opinion of the recommended route. We still have the ability to go forward with the repaving regardless of the safety grant. So at this time, I believe we should continue to hold in committee. So no, thank you very much.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
The motion to remove resolution 2020-111 from committee fails 4-3 for failure to receive a 2/3 majority vote.
Madam President,
Councilman Lippert.
given the vote, I provide notice of intention to relieve such committee at the next council meeting scheduled on December 1st, 2020.
Notice to council has been given. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And nowhere in that conversation did I hear anything to say that the current resolution was somehow needed to be changed or updated. It just simply did not want to be voted on. So that's why I'm providing my notice. And Madam President, this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman, Chairwoman of the Environmental Control Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do not, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Glassburn, Chairman of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No, Madam President, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly, Chairman of the Recreation, Public Parks and Buildings Committee, do you have a report this evening?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. The Recreation, Public Parks and Building Committee met on November 10th at 8:52 p.m. Present was all of council, the mayor, law director, finance director, HR director, planning director, the assistant rec commissioner, Chris Wetmore, and guests. We discussed 2020-118, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to renew the contract between the city and Carrie Stahl-Tipton, North Olmsted Gymnastics Incorporated, for the provision of professional gymnastics instruction services at the North Olmsted Recreation Center for an additional 6-month term with the option to extend for 1 full year. Discussion was held about the agreement, and during this discussion, it was recommended that on page 3, item 1 of the agreement for gymnastic program services, that it be amended in one of the sentences. And at this time, I recommend that we amend 2020-118 on page 3, item 1, and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to amend resolution 2020-118 made by Councilman Kelly, seconded by Councilwoman Heeman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Heeman,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn,
Yes.
Mr. Broussard,
Yes.
Mr. Schuman.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-118 is amended with a vote of 7-0.
And then after discussing this change in verbiage, it was recommended to go to full council with that change, and that passed 3-0. Next was resolution 2020-119, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of North Olmsted to enter into a one-year agreement with Right Vending LLC in order to provide for vending machine services at the North Olmsted Recreation Center. This was also discussed with Assistant Rec Commissioner Chris Webmore. Right in the agreement would give 15% commission of gross sales of all the snack and ice cream machines would come back to the city. So after this discussion, it was recommended to go to full council, and it passed in committee 3-0. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any letters or communications to come before council at this time?
No, Madam President.
Thank you for joining our meeting tonight. At this time, council will hear comments from the public. Please remember to state your name and address for our clerk. If you live in a city other than North Olmsted, please state the name of the city. We will start with those who have notified us via chat. Anyone who has not notified us via the chat feature and would like to comment, please unmute your phone and start your comment when prompted. Clerk Massarolo, has anyone notified you that they would like to comment this evening?
No, Madam President.
At this time, is there anyone on the computer or the phone who would like to comment? Please go ahead and address council at this time. Yes, Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you. Jeff Sturgeon, 3092 West 231. I would just like to ask council to consider doing whatever they have to do to maybe get that third lane done on Clegg Road. I think it's needed. I think everybody with any kind of sense would know that that's what worked on the other side of Clegg Road. It's what the other side of Lorraine, what they need now. And it's really what they need. It worked great there. That was done in the 90s. And when I look back in the 90s, there was 3 proposals for that section of Clegg Road. And one of them cost the city about $120,000. And I think our law director was, Michael Groh was the councilman at the time when that Clegg Road project was done. And if I remember right, they were going to get rid of the curb and level 7 homes, and there was 2 other projects also considered. And this was none of them agreed. They didn't come up with that, and it was the middle lane that everybody wanted, and everybody eventually it came to it. I know it's a thing about money, but all we got to do is consider a way. How do we get it done? Okay, and the first proposal is maybe it's not always the best. Okay, this was one proposal that we've seen. We saw 3 proposals on the other side, and please give it some thought. Don't just think that there's got to be a way to make it done. I'm sure we can get it done. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments from our audience, we will now move into legislation.
Legislation on third reading. Ordinance 2020-78, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance providing for the amendment of Chapter 1115, definitions of the codified ordinances of the City of North Olmsted as amended.
Madam President, I move for the adoption of ordinance number 2020-78 and ask for second.
Second.
Motion to adopt ordinance 2020-78 made by Councilwoman Williamson, seconded by Councilman Lippert. Roll call, please.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Ms. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Broussard,
Yes.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-78 is adopted with a vote of 7-0.
Ordinance 2020-79, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance providing for the replacement of Chapter 1163, signs of the codified ordinances of the City of North Olmsted as twice amended.
Madam President, I move for the adoption of ordinance number 2020-79 and ask for second.
Second.
Motion to adopt ordinance 2020-79 made by Councilwoman Williamson, seconded by Councilman Limpert. Roll call, please.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn,
Yes, with comment. I'd like to thank the chairwoman, Ms. Williamson, for her leadership on this issue and taking the time to go through this, to not let it move forward until it was right. There were a lot of things that needed fixed. There was a new section that council added that I think will be a real boon for businesses. And I really credit her and, quite honestly, Council President Jones for helping this council get through that to make this a good final product. Thank you.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes, and I'd also like to make a comment if I could. For well over a year and a half, the planning department, building, engineering, law, certainly our consultant, the public, stakeholders, business community, representatives from the Chamber of Commerce. This went through the Planning Commission and, of course, the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee of Council. And all of these had an imprint on the final legislation. Kudos to the planning director for her work on this. And I agree with Mr. Glassburn. Kudos to the BZD chair for keeping this moving. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Seaman,
Yes, with a comment. I also would like to thank Chairperson Williamson because this was difficult. It wasn't an easy conversation. We had several meetings, and I would hope that, when there is a disparity in our opinions and what we think is best for each of our wards and or the city as a whole, that same path will be followed. And I would implore Mr. Limpert to please respect that and perhaps call another committee meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Broussard,
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-79 is adopted with a vote of 7-0.
legislation on second reading. Resolution 2020-114, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution approving of and authorizing the mayor to enter into a collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 2681, Clerical and Technical Unit for the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. Resolution 2020-115, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the Director of Human Resources to solicit proposals pursuant to the Request for Proposal Process, RFP, for the lease and servicing of photocopiers, and further authorizing the mayor, subject to approval of the Board of Control, to enter into a contract for the same and declaring an emergency as amended. Ordinance 2020-116, introduced by Council President Jones. An ordinance amending Section 131.06, entitled Authority to Accept Donations of Chapter 131 of the Administrative Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted, entitled Mayor, in order to revise standards for the acceptance of donations to the City of North Olmsted. Ordinance 2020-117, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance amending Section 555.09, Emergency Exception of Chapter 555, Noise Control of the General Offenses Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted to include emergency generators as an exception to the noise control standards and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Councilman Broussard.
I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings as this was discussed in committee. It is an issue of timing, and I'll ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings made by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
That motion passes with a vote of 7-0. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address council regarding ordinance 2020-117, please do so now.
Hearing none and seeing none, Madam President, I'll move to adopt ordinance 2020-117 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt ordinance 2020-117 made by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-117 is adopted with a vote of 7-0.
Resolution 2020-118, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the mayor to renew the contract between the city and Carrie Skull Tipton North Olmsted Gymnastics, Inc. for the provision of professional gymnastics instruction services at the North Olmsted Recreation Center for an additional 6-month term with option to extend for a full one year as amended. Resolution 2020-119, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of North Olmsted to enter into a 1-year agreement with Right Vending, LLC, in order to provide for vending machine services at the North Olmsted Recreation Center. Resolution 2020-120, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the Director of Planning and Community Development to make application on behalf of the City of North Olmsted for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, funds for the fiscal year 2021 for the Elm Road Rehabilitation Project, further authorizing the mayor to accept grant funds if awarded and to execute contract with Cuyahoga County if required, and declaring an emergency. Legislation on first reading. Ordinance 2020-122. An ordinance establishing the rates of compensation for various administrative and legislative personnel for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023, with salary ranges of a 0% increase for 2021 and a 2.5% increase in 2022 and 2023 for full-time and part-time positions amending sections 14, 15, and 16, and otherwise restating compensation, benefits, and descriptions for various administrative and legislative personnel for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Ordinance 2020-123, an ordinance establishing and fixing the compensation for the elected officials of the city of North Olmsted at an increase of 0% for 2022, 0% for 2023, and 2.5% for 2024, and 2% for 2025 for the term of office commencing January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2025.
On behalf of myself and all of council, I introduce and place on first reading.
Ordinance 2020-124, an ordinance dispensing with the RFP process, otherwise required by section 111.03 et sec of the Administrative Code, and authorizing the mayor, subject to approval of the Board of Control, if necessary, to enter into a 2-year agreement with the Walter H. Drain Company for the purpose of providing ordinance codification services to the city of North Olmsted and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I was going to introduce on behalf of myself, all of council, and the mayor, and place
go
on
on.
first reading.
Ordinance 2020-125, an ordinance authorizing a temporary vacancy in the position of Director of Public Safety.
Madam President, I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Resolution 2020-126, a resolution authorizing the mayor to purchase a new 375 kVA generator from Ohio Cat at a cost of $61,300 for the Laverne Pump Station through a state purchase program, and further authorizing the mayor to execute all contract documents for purchase of the same.
Madam President,
Mayor,
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
thank you. In looking to schedule our council committee meetings for next Tuesday, November 24th, Councilman Schuman.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll have a Finance Committee meeting on 11/24 at 7 o'clock, and we'll be discussing 122, 123, 124, and 125. And I would invite the mayor and the other elected officials, along with the HR director. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to schedule an Environmental Control Committee meeting for 7/25 to discuss 2020-126 for the purchase of a generator for the Laverne Pump Station. And I'd like to ask the mayor to attend, as well as all of our other fine colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before council, this meeting of November 17th, 2020 is adjourned at 8:43 p.m.